So, this is an adaptation of a graphic novel by Chester Brown and includes details about your life and times. Uh, what did you and your writing team, including Chester, want to get correct about this interpretation?
Well, the gosh, I mean, the book is really an amazing book. When it came out in 2014, the events of that the movie is inspired by had long ago taken place.
Right.
So we had grown up from that time, and I was able to see and appreciate his book. Um, Basically, the book is a memoir of the period of time after I had proposed opening up our relationship because we were a formerly romantic couple.
Hmm.
And Chester didn't want to be in a relationship. He has no ability to flirt, no interest in flirting. And after being celibate for a long time, he decided to explore paying for sex in Toronto in the
Right.
late 90s. And he had the wherewithal to know that it was the substance of a great story in the form of a memoir and write about what he had witnessed. And what he had witnessed was a complete lack of rights afforded sex workers that puts them in harm's way. And so his graphic novel was it was a political treatise on the decriminalization of sex work. And the last fifth of the book are his appendices with all kinds of academic, historic notes, political ideas, uh, just expand and expounded all notes in the back there. And they're really, really so interesting. And what struck me and why I wanted to make that book at the time was sex work rights had everything to do for me about labor rights and by extension, human rights and just all rights for people. And and it struck me as an important work. And so I thought, okay, this is easy. It's this gorgeous comic book. It's, pretty much a storyboard. All I have to
Right.
do is, you know,
Yeah.
my first go of it was a verbatim transcription. And Chester and I looked at it and realized that a graphic novel is not a movie. It was terrible. His, because it was a political treatise, there was no sort of story arc. It was his perspective, going, and so very episodic and really in service of the politic. And he had seen 23 sex workers in that period of time, and each was a sort of little discrete moment, and then he continues on with his argument. So yeah, Chester was like, "Oh, forget it, again, just pack it in. This isn't going to make a movie." But I didn't want to throw in the towel, and I'm a problem solver and knew the guts were in there. There was something very important to talk about human rights. There were three things. So basically, the book and the movie are very separate. Chester didn't write anything in the book. As soon as he granted that book to me, because we're friends and he trusted me, he let me go with it. And of course, I wanted to pass by. I wrote hundreds of iterations of that script, trying to make it work. It was very difficult because the book is myopically from his perspective. He tried to protect the details of the sex workers. I'm a character only in the beginning, offering the inciting incident, and that is me suggesting opening up the relationship. Other than that, I kind of disappear.
Right.
And he said, "Why is I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "I was protecting the details of your life." And so, oftentimes the women are framed out of, his comic panel. And it's really about his voyage, which is very, very compelling because when that book came out, nobody was talking about sex worker rights, let alone from the perspective of a client.
Hmm.
But I knew that I wanted to expand that and bring the women to life. And I knew that I had to get beyond the episodic nature. So I had to figure out, I had to see how Chester evolved because movies are about, they're three act structures about people that make decisions, flawed. They're flawed. There are consequences. When I said that to Chester, he was like, "But I have no flaws." And I was like, oh God. So, he was, we get along famously, but working with him was very tough because he didn't share any of the details. I would say, well, what about this person? I can't say anything, Sook-Yin. So I really had to go down a route of researching, talking with sex workers, uh, and also looking at the source material for clues, letting it play in my imagination, dreaming up Denise, who has had a 21-year paid for monogamous relationship, paid for sex monogamous relationship with. And had to dream up all these people. And it wasn't until looking at his book, because it's so immense, it's a lot of tunnels that he goes down, and all of them very interesting. But I think when you're a writer, you can afford to go down all those curves, but as a filmmaker, I can't. So I had to like distill, boil down like a delicious bouillabaisse, the ingredients that to me were compelling. And to me, that was like, of course, the sex worker rights. He questions possessive romantic monogamy, and I thought that was a provocative question.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, yes, you know, is possessive romantic monogamy, and that's the kind of monogamy most of us adhere to in our society, is that most loving when you put a fence around yourself and a fence around the other and say essentially, I own you and you own me and we only have sex with one another.
Right.
Is that a loving gesture? He postulates that. And I wanted to dramatize that in action as opposed to didactic politic. I wanted to dramatize that in a story, and I knew that I would have to add tons of what was going on in our relationship because Chester and I never broke up, and we continued living together in a tiny 11-foot wide row house while I went one route, the culturally sanctioned manner of canoodling called dating, perilous dating, while Chester paid for sex. And we have an astonishing relationship in that we're very honest with one another. And Chester's very much a person who loves freedom, his own freedom, and everyone else's freedom. Making sure that you also respect people and don't hurt people.
Mhm.
But it was always talked about. Like how can we work through this? At first, I was like, "What are you doing? Oh my God!" Much like how I show Sunny in the movie, going, she's trying to be all cool because it was her idea to open the relationship, but she's freaked out when she finds out that he's paying for sex. And then similarly so, I was like that as well. And it took some doing
So
to like outgrow my ignorance, and it was really through talking with Chester. So to answer your question, it took many iterations, many years, the realization that I had to add tons of what was going on in our lives that is not in the book. So the book and the movie are very different. We call it a double act of portraiture. So I try to uphold Chester's memory of himself in his memoir. I call myself, or the person based on me, Sunny. Many of the events that happened to her happened to me, but I take those events and I kind of craft them into a story. And it's a work of autofiction, so there's some that I glean from reality and some not. And in the later iterations in the last year, Joanne Sarrazin came on to work with me, and she really is great at film structure. So really helped with the structural 3-act elements and also sharpened the jokes. And she also pulled a lot of like just asked me assailed me with questions. And then I found, funny things to offer from Sunnyside.
this is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2026.